Hi, welcome to the very first episode of Pain's Gain. I am your host, the master podcaster, Major Payne himself, and Pain's Gain is a video series that I'm starting today where I preview games or series or review games and series. Now this is my favorite time of the year. It's the PBA Philippine Cup playoff time. My last podcast, Staying Major, I reviewed the eliminations and gave you a quarterfinal preview. Quickly, before the semifinals start, I would like to review the quarterfinals, talk about them a little bit, talk about the four series that happened, go over them in depth, dive deep, inform you guys what I am seeing on the basketball court. And I just want to test out this series, see how you guys like it, see how much I like doing them, and then we can move on from there. I hope this to be a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy my breakdowns. Now, after the eliminations concluded last week, their quarterfinals were set, and they got started over the weekend. There were 4 series and only 8 teams left out of the 12 that started at the beginning of the PBA Philippine Cup. Now, there were 2 series that weren't very exciting, and there were 2 series that I found to be very, very intriguing. The first one I want to go over is San Miguel Rain or Shine. That's the number 1 seed. San Miguel Beer, they were 10-1 in the eliminations, and they faced Rain or Shine. They got in, beating Blackwater in a knockout game to sneak into the 8th seed, and they had a tall task ahead of them as they had to play San Miguel, the number 1 team, and not only were they playing them, but they had to beat them twice. Now, there isn't really much to say about this series. San Miguel won 98-91 to advance. The game was interesting. Rain or Shine made it interesting, but there's so much to worry about with San Miguel. They're such a great team. They're such a well-rounded team. You know, going into the game, you got to worry about Junmar Fajardo, of course. You got to worry about the pick and roll game of Alex Cabagna. You got to be aware of the defense of Chris Ross. Arwin Santos is still at the top of his game. So you're worried about all these things, and then a guy off the bench, R.R. Garcia, who's a good young guard, comes in, goes 5 for 7 from threes, player of the game with 25 points in 26 minutes. And just when you think you have all the bases covered, they have people coming off the bench that are capable of giving them a lift like that in playoff situations. So RR played great. It was still a close game at the end. Rain or Shine had trouble getting the rebound. Arwin Santos had a big putback to really seal the game. Other than that, there's not much to talk about other than San Miguel, to nobody's surprise, has advanced to the semifinals. I guaranteed that. I went way out on a limb and guaranteed that in my last Staying Major podcast. But they're in the semifinals. They're 11-1, and they're still the favorites to win the Philippine Cup. Enough of that. Let's move on to the next series. The next series I want to talk to you about, Phoenix and Star. Now, going into the series, I picked Star, and my prediction proved correct. Phoenix looked like they had absolutely no clue what to do on either side of the ball. Credit goes to Star. Star, after losing their first 2 games now, they have gone 9-2 since then. They had a 31-point win in Game 1 and a 91-71 win in Game 2. If you're Phoenix, there's a lot of things to work on. They got blown out 4 times in the eliminations. They got blown out twice in playoff games. They're back to the drawing board. They have some pieces there, but they got to figure out how to put it all together as they move forward. Star, on the other hand, they are the best offensive team in the league. They certainly showed that this series. They look to be a for real title contender. Really anxious to see their semifinal matchup, but they have been very, very impressive for most of this conference, and they look to be cooking on all cylinders. They've made some great moves in the offseason. They made a coaching change, which looks like it has turned out positive. The culture there seems incredible. They drafted Halalan. They traded for Aldridge Ramos, and they traded for Paul Lee. So all those were great moves. It's paying off for them now, and they look to be right there in the thick of it and to challenge for the Philippine Cup title. But enough of those two series. It's really the other two series that I really want to dig deep into, and the two that I was really fired up going into the quarterfinals, and I really want to break down what happened on the court in those two series. The first up, Global Port Talk and Text. This series, I was very excited and I was anxious to see what was actually going to happen. Talk and Text is a powerhouse team. They have a great lineup. So they got stuck with a really tough matchup in the quarterfinals versus Global Port. They went 6-5, but Terrence Romeo had really stepped up his game. Everyone knows he can score, and he certainly did that, averaging almost 29 points a game. But he also averaged 6 assists, was second in the league in assists. He was also very efficient in his scoring, where he shot 44% from the three-point line. So he really had an incredible elimination round. We all know Stanley Pringle is really explosive and a joy to watch. So Talk and Text had their hands full, but Global has had Terrence Romeo, has Stanley Pringle, and they're the up-and-coming team, and they were really looking to make a statement in Game 1, where Global Port gave up 109 points to Talk and Text. Talk and Text shot 53% from the field, and as a result, Global lost 109-101. And Terrence Romeo, he had, at first glance, a good game with 28 points and 8 assists. But if you take a closer look at it, he went 10 for 28 from the field, and he had 6 turnovers. Not a very efficient game. Went to the foul line only 3 times. Those were things that went exactly the way Talk and Text wanted them to go. A lot of credit really has to go to Talk and Text. They have the type of defenders that can really give perimeter guys a tough time. You know, Ryan Reyes has been one of the top perimeter defenders in the league since he's been in the league. They have a rookie, Pagoy, who's known as a very good defender, and he proved that to be true in this series.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
They also have Ganuelas Rosser, who is also a very good athlete, a very good defender. And then they also have big guys to where they switch and they run some pick and roll. You have Troy Rosario, who's tall, he's long, he's young and athletic and eager to play defense. Kelly Williams even gets out on a switch. He's a tall athlete that can move his feet. So with these defenders, they gave Terrence Romeo a really tough time of it in Game 1. Jason Castro, player of the game in Game 1, 20 points. Moala Tautua showed some life, 17 points. It was a great team victory in Game 1. With their backs against the wall, came out and played a much better defensive game. They limited Talk and Text to only 44% from the field in comparison to 53% in Game 1, and it was a much better game. But again, Talk and Text was able to win 95-90. Terrence went 5 for 23 from the field. Now, he did get to the foul line 13 times, but he did turn it over 5 times. And as a result, Talk and Text was able to win the series in 2 games, sweeping, advancing to the semifinals. Now, a closer look at Talk and Text, they did a lot of things well. You know, Jason Castro was great in Game 1. Renadel de Ocampo was great in Game 2, scoring 25 points in 23 minutes. Moala Tautua played great in both games. They looked really good. Their defense, like I said, Ryan Reyes, Ganuelas Rosser, Pagoy, they were great in defending Terrence Romeo. So they look like a team after struggling to kind of find themselves in eliminations. They did look good against Global Port. Their next matchup, which is in a completely different universe, is San Miguel. That's an interesting challenge. They took care of business and they're ready to move on into the semifinal round. Now, I want to talk about Global Port a little bit, and I've talked a lot about Terrence Romeo in this breakdown, and we're going to talk a little more because they obviously have a talent in Terrence Romeo. They have another talent in Stanley Pringle, and I think they have a pretty good all-around lineup. I think Coach Franz Pumaren is a legitimate, well-respected coach that knows what he's doing. However, they have to find a way to where they can fit those talents into team success, to find it to be more efficient. Okay, it's the playoffs, and while Terrence was pretty efficient during the eliminations, this playoff series against a good defending team shut him down. He was 15 for 51 from the field in this series. That is 29%. That's awful. And he was also 7 for 30 from the three-point line, which is 23%, which is also awful. And he had 11 turnovers in 2 games. So one has to also wonder, with the amount of time Terrence has the ball in his hands, the amount of minutes that he's playing, along with Stanley Pringle, they're obviously trying to create everything for their team offensively. However, with all that effort going into offense, are they able to put forth a great effort and a great focused effort on defense? That's questionable, especially when the other team, like Talking Tex, is rotating different guys in. They're going to their bench. The guys that are in aren't handling the ball as much, and their focus is defense. So I just felt that their offense was terribly inefficient. I'd like to see Terrence score on no dribbles, on 2 or 3 dribbles rather than 7 or 8, and then attacking while the defense is already set. So it's been a long time since they've won a playoff game, and they have to show that they can win in the playoffs playing that style, or they have to change that style if their team wants to be successful. So that's a challenge they have going forward. That is my critique of the Talking Tex Global Port series. Now let's look at the last series of the quarterfinals, Ginebra, Alaska. Now on my last podcast with Rafe Bartholomew, we discussed the quarterfinal matchups, and this was another matchup we were really looking forward to. We thought Ginebra had a great chance to make this series interesting. Alaska was a second place team at 7-4. They had a twice to beat advantage over Ginebra San Miguel, who finished 6-5 and somehow found themselves in the 7th spot. The game was pretty intense, and it was really a tale of 2 halves. And Alaska went up at halftime. They were up 41-29 at the half. And early in the third quarter, it kind of was just more of Alaska. At one point they got up 53-37, and then the bottom just dropped out for Alaska that quarter. It was a stunning turn of events where things just started going in for Ginebra. Alaska was making wild turnovers. Once the crowd got into it, once Ginebra took over in that third quarter, Japeth Aguilar played great the whole game. LA Tenorio was great in the second half. Things were just rolling for Ginebra, and they were able to come from behind when things were looking awful at the beginning of the third quarter. And after losing the first half 41-29, Ginebra came back and won the second half 56-40. So it was really a big second half effort for Ginebra to win 85-81. Obviously, you can look at that game, and Alaska really fell apart in the third quarter. They allowed Ginebra to score 21 unanswered points. They started the quarter with a 12-point lead and ended with an 8-point deficit. They were outscored 33-13 overall. I'm not sure how many technical fouls Alaska had. They had at least 3, and you lose a 4-point game where you're giving up these technical fouls. I also wonder what the deal was with Vic Manuel. He only played 18 minutes. I know Alaska likes to play a lot of guys and get a lot of guys out there. That's their style, but he's one of your best players. He's one of the best power forwards in the league. He's a guy that can get a bucket and that is efficient, and he plays 18 minutes and takes 7 shots. For Ginebra, congratulations. That's why you have a coach like Tim Cohn. He's been in these types of situations before and overcome them. So he's certainly not afraid. He knows how to prep his team, and he showed that again in this series. Ginebra got great play and great leadership from LA Tenorio. He's obviously the leader of that team now, and he's really shown the way the second half of game one, and then today with 31 points. It's great to have a leader and a player of LA's caliber, and to show the way, that's really a mark of a good team. And they had great play from role players. Chris Ellis played well tonight, and so did Mariano. Mariano had a big 20 points filling in for Joe Devance, and they didn't really skip a beat. Japeth Aguilar was in foul trouble most of the night, and they were still able to stay with Alaska and pull away in the third quarter. Calvin Abueva really fought hard tonight. He was an animal out there. He seemed to be everywhere when he was on the court. He had 29 points and 13 rebounds. Vic Manuel got 28 minutes tonight, played pretty well and had 23 points, but it wasn't enough. Again in game two, there was a free throw discrepancy, 44-31. Ginebra shot 44 free throws. Then again, Alaska didn't shoot well from the foul line, only making 17 of 31 foul shots. So they kind of kicked themselves. Alaska, I think they're going to look at missed free throws. They're going to look at games 1 and 2, the third quarters. That's where they really lost this series. I don't know what was going on with RJ Jazul. He normally is a pretty consistent, reliable guard that has played in big games before, but he was held scoreless this series. I don't know if he's been fighting nagging injuries or he just hasn't been playing that well, but he was a non-factor in this series. It's got to be disappointing. They were badly outplayed coming out of halftime in the third quarter. I'm not quite sure how you fix that, but they have some work ahead of them. So Ginebra back to the semifinals. They're matched up against Star. Should be a great series. So if you like this video series and would like to see more, go ahead and absolutely smash that like button and put a comment below. I would love to get some feedback and interact with you guys that watch this video. I'm doing a semifinals playoff preview with Ali Peak this week on my Staying Major podcast. Unfortunately, it's going to be after game 1 of the Talkin' Tech San Miguel series. That's a 7-game series, but before that series starts right here, I want to predict San Miguel winning in 6 games. I'll go into more depth and detail about that on the podcast, so make sure you go check that out. And we'll also preview the other series, talk a little bit of quarterfinals, but I really wanted to review the quarterfinals here, give you my breakdown, give you my thoughts, give you what I see, and then we will talk about the semifinals on the podcast. Thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Till next time.